being closest to what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And that's not saying that to kind of like be buzzwords for anyone listening, but like it's really true for me. Like when I've kind of like followed the passion part of the thing, which included the music that got that first record deal, and it included the thing that was like my first Grammy nomination, and included the thing that I'm doing now that I'm most passionate about. Like it was all like just allowing that passionate side to
Yeah.
run free and say, what do I actually want to do here, with my life, with my music, with my career.
Three things you're going to learn from this episode today. Number one, how a career pivot from medicine to music led to Grammy-winning success. Number two, the behind-the-scenes secrets of working with global superstars. Number three, how to blend artistry, business, and philanthropy to build a lasting legacy. Welcome to this episode of the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I feature Olympians, CEOs, disruptors, authors, professional athletes, and the best of the best, where they share their stories of resilience with my lens on leadership and culture. Let's get started. What do you get when you combine a Grammy Award-winning producer who's worked with everyone from John Legend to Coldplay to Sia, a sonic architect whose work spans platinum-selling albums, award-winning films, and chart-topping hits, a visionary entrepreneur building studios, labels, and gear companies from Manhattan to the Caribbean, and a longtime friend who's been shaping the soundtracks of our lives for decades? You get my friend, Scott Jacoby. Scott's story isn't just about music, it's about mastery, vision, and the relentless pursuit of artistry at the highest level. Whether he's behind the mixing board, scoring a film, or shaping the next generation of music innovators, Scott is proof that one person really can change the way the world listens. Scott, welcome to the show!
Very happy to be here, Lindsay. Thank you. And that was, I think that stands alone as one of the greatest intros, or if not the, yeah. Thank you.
Oh, I love that. That makes me happy. I've been looking forward to this for so long. And as I said at the top, we are old friends. But for those that don't know you, could you share a little bit about your story?
Sure. Well, we are old friends, and it's nice to kind of like reconnect in this context. So I appreciate it. Um, I mean, it's hard to encapsulate, a life and career, but essentially, I'm a kid who was born in New York City and grew up in outside of New York City in suburbs, and went to school just like everyone else, and had the things that I did as a kid. I played sports, and I kind of like was introduced to music, and I think it really resonated with me at a young age, but for a very large portion of my life, since the time I started playing instruments and being involved in songwriting and things like that, I didn't ever think that music would be a career. First of all, I thought it was impossible. I had no examples of that in my life, and I also thought I wasn't good enough to do it. And so as such, that wasn't. I think my head was in music as something I loved to do, but never sort of considering it as a career. And then my life went on, uh, in terms of just I went to college and studied, what I was interested in studying, and it wasn't until sort of even after college where I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, and was headed down another path. I'm sure we'll kind of get to that, but like that, I realized that music was something that maybe I could do, and maybe it wasn't impossible, or who knows, but I wanted to give it a try.
Well, so let's start there because you were going down a path of medicine and you're a smarty pants. You had great grades, you went to a great college, and that was kind of the goal. And we come from a place where our parents have pretty high expectations. So I totally get you with music not being an option. That's for, wild and crazy people, not people that are disciplined and get good grade. Like that's so talk through that.
Well, I mean, I call it, and this is not to sound grandiose, but like, there's some people who are sort of like two side of the brain people. And in many respects, I wish I was sort of like more one-sided because things could have been more clear. But I think that my two sides probably work. I'm not saying they work great, but they probably work equally well. And so I think I had a number of different options available to me. And part of that is just like a little bit of privilege too, that like I wasn't forced into doing certain things. But but just given that I had sort of an analytical side and an intellectual side and a creative side and I could have leaned one way or another. So I credit my parents very much with sort of being open with those kind of things. They knew I had some talents and they knew I had some aspirations and also and other limitations and said, Scott, we want you to do what you enjoy doing. And it took me a while to figure out exactly what that was, in part because I like doing lots of different things. Even
Yeah.
to this day, you know, I love my primary career. Like I and can't believe that I'm fortunate enough to do this every day. I truly mean that. But um, if you had told me that I was going to be a furniture maker, which is another thing that I love to do, I make some furniture and things like that, mostly out of like found objects. I would be really happy doing that too. And that's a different sort of area that's exercised during that.
I mean, you were such an interesting kid, in high school where you were doing jazz band and you could play the piano and you could pretty much play anything anyone put in front of you. And then you were also playing soccer and, getting great grades. So, yeah, you had lots of choices that you could make. So, just take me through specifically the whole medicine thing. Because did you go to college for medicine? Like, that's what were you
No.
studying that? No. Okay.
I didn't. I went to college and I studied psychology, and I studied psychology because I was interested in that, genuinely, and I was interested in sort of it's such a cliche, but like the what makes people tick. But I think more so than that, I had a lot of friends going back to high school who were very creative and very gifted.
Mhm.
And I saw a lot of them being on the edge, so to speak, of being able to hold it together in certain
Yeah.
contexts, right? And we know folks like that,
Yeah.
all of us do. And I was fascinated by that. I was fascinated by the sort of the intersection of creative genius and madness, to again, cliche and that whole thing. And so I think the area of psychology just intrigued me, and my best friend at the time, fit that mold as well. And I started working at psychiatric hospitals, and it became an interest and you could say a passion too. And so it was sort of an obvious choice for me at college to study that, and was very interested in it both clinically as well as just almost philosophically to just understand myself and others. And then some pivotal things happened along the way. During college, I studied abroad in Kenya and Tanzania.
Mm.
And that was at 20 years old, that was a really formative experience. And I remember there's one specific thing, I was there as a psychology major and I was intrigued to see. I lived in very remote areas, and where I was basically the only person who looked like me that folks had ever seen, and I was there, sort of studying a little bit how a rural community of this sort handles mental illness.
Sure.
And I saw this guy who was clearly what we would call schizophrenic.
Mhm.
Um, and he wasn't, medicated and he wasn't hospitalized.
Mm-mm.
And he had a role in society, which was to go back and forth between where the village was and where a stream was, which was, several meters down, and it was a long walk. And all he did was walk back and forth and carry this thing of water. And he was like jacked and
I
just like
bet.
that was what his life is. He didn't talk to anyone, but he did. But everyone knew him and was friendly. And that was. It seems a little bit, sort of naive to say that that's how we should deal with mental illness. So it wasn't so much that, but it was amazing to see. And so that was sort of what planted a seed for me to go back to sort of study this more and understand, I guess, what you would call the aspects of mental illness that transcend culture and the things that don't,
Hmm.
and schizophrenia is equally distributed in all parts of the world.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, but the way that we deal with it isn't. And then there are certain mental illnesses that aren't equally distributed and don't transcend culture. Like anorexia, for example, is something that you don't see as prevalent in certain cultures. It's different percentages according to where you are, dealing with all sorts of factors and cultural factors and
Mm.
societal factors that we know. So that sort of fascinated me. And so when I graduated from Skidmore, I wanted to study that more, and I applied for a Fulbright grant to study that and go back to East Africa to kind of like home in on that particular discipline. Was somewhere in between, psychology, psychiatry, and anthropology. And I went down that path and applied for a Fulbright grant. And then in the end, I was interviewed and kind of like final contestant and didn't get the grant.
Mhm.
And Skidmore called up the Fulbright Commission. They were like, Scott, we were curious why Scott didn't get the Fulbright because it was one of the best applications we had ever seen come out of
Mhm.
school. And they said, no, it was an amazing application, an amazing thing he wanted to study, but like he would have to be a medical doctor
Oh,
to do that study. And so I
yeah.
was basically like, fuck you, I'm going to medical school. So that was really what happened. That's what did that. It was, I think it was just one of those things of hitting an obstacle
Yeah.
and then saying, okay, let me get around it. So sorry to make the story long, but basically, when I didn't get the Fulbright grant and they said, you'd have to go to medical school, then I said, I'm going to medical school. But I was a college graduate at this point who didn't take any of the pre-med courses
Mm.
and who didn't take the MCAT or didn't do any of this stuff, let alone apply to medical school. So at that point, at 22 or whatever, when you're graduating, I went back to school as an undergraduate, more undergraduate stuff to take chemistry, biology, biochem,
Sure.
physics, calculus, etc. All things which I managed to evade during
I was
college.
gonna say, not our favorite subjects.
Not our favorite subjects, but soon to be, I kind of liked them
Yeah.
actually, particularly organic chemistry for some reason. I really got into that. So I went back to school, studied that, took the MCATs, was working in a psychiatric hospital and doing other things while that was going on, and then was, fortunate enough to get into medical school and did that. And it wasn't until sort of a little bit into that process, after, a 2 or 3 year grind after graduating from college that I said, let me, you know, let me take a look at whether I really think that I should be here. So that's when sort of other thoughts were creeping in.
Yeah, so where did music emerge? How did that come? I mean, I imagine you love music, you loved piano, you loved playing anything you could get your hands on. Did
Right.
that stop during all of this time, or was that still happening, and it never left?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say generally it never left, and it was allowed to exist in this place of sort of pure passion because I
Sure.
wasn't worried about the career aspect of it, and it was sort of the outlet. And
Hmm.
so it was a very like it's a great time for me musically because like I was so into like collecting records and listening to stuff and playing and making my own stuff, which and all of that was going on at the time. And I think what happened was that um, all of this passion that I had for music was filling a certain, void.
Hmm.
And I started to think about, could I really, do this
Hmm.
for a living? And I think the greatest fear that I had, it wasn't so much a fear of failure. I was sort of less scared of that. I think I was scared that I'd take the thing that I liked the most and ruin it by trying to make a living out of it.
Yeah. All right, so you're now rethinking
Mhm.
where you are.
Yeah.
What is the first jumping off point that makes you realize this can be a career?
Yeah, I think it was more a thought experiment than anything real because I think I asked myself a couple of questions. And this was during that time when I was debating leaving medical school. I was like, can I do this? Um, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think anyone can be super confident in that, but like, would I like to try? And I think I was able to answer that question. I would. And then the other thing is, can I do this in a way that feels right to me, just given my own perspectives about things? And what's that mean? That means doing in a way that I think, has some, integrity to it that I wouldn't be dragged into things. Like the worst thing that I could see for myself was like ending up doing music that I didn't like because it's
Sure.
like a double like shit that's I gave up a lot to do this and I'm not even doing the things and would it have been better left as a passion, just
Mhm.
like an investment banker who's really into sailing, a lot of those folks, haven't contemplated doing sailing as a career, that's a
Sure.
tough thing to do, right? So in my case, that was, that was the tough stuff. And once I kind of got over those hurdles, I said I could do it. But it wasn't until a few years after that there was any kind of like proof in that, because it wasn't, this wasn't any kind of like, overnight success story. It
Yeah.
had to, it was a real um, uh, sort of heart-wrenching kind of like period of transitioning, from one particular pretty normal and well outlined career trajectory that is
Mhm.
in medicine and being a doctor. It's pretty, med school for 4 years,
Yeah.
residency, whatever, right? That
Follow the path. Yeah.
follow the path, but to something that is very nonlinear and
Yeah.
where there's no chance of success or employment or anything like that. So that took a little bit.
So I'm loving this conversation so much because, my kids are in their senior year of high school right now, and there's a whole lot of this soul searching. What do you want to major in? What do you want to study? What do you think you want to do? And your path is so not the straight and just follow the steps and do the thing. Like you've really kind of gone really across the board on the stuff that you completed, and then now you're deciding that music
Mhm.
is your jam.
Yeah.
How did you have that first break? What was it? And, how did it let you know, okay, yeah, this is exactly where I should be?
I think when I and all this is, with hindsight, because while you're in it, it's a little bit bewildering. But
Yeah,
I knew that when I left medical school, I had to sort of get to a point where I could support myself, and
sure.
I also knew that I didn't see a path where I could do that through music instantly.
Right.
And I also had to kind of like get out. There were a few steps backwards after dropping out of medical school. I had to
Okay.
live at home a little bit and kind of like
Mhm.
regroup and just figure out where I wanted to be and how I wanted to do it. So I eventually, in a few months, I got a really cheap apartment in the East Village in New York City, and found a job in an area that at least I was interested in,
Mhm.
which was international development. It kind of tied into a lot of the travels that I'd done. And I worked at a really great organization and was able to occupy space where my schedule was pretty flexible. And I did that for about 2 years, I think. And during that time, the goal was to kind of like be working there and doing a good job, but that was essentially my day job. And during that time, to kind of build up enough currency, and I use that not literally, but to be able to transition.
Yeah,
And
well,
so,
you needed the credibility of, yeah, you can hire me and I can deliver. And what
yeah.
was the kind of work that you were getting hired for?
Right. So initially, like a few things happened during that period. One is that I made an album with a friend of mine from college, of sort of electronic instrumental music that was really adventurous, and we got a small record deal for that.
Nice.
And so, that was my first kind of thing of like a record deal, and it wasn't a big deal, but like what it did do is put a little bit of money in our pockets, and also gave the impetus to say like, hey, let's start a recording studio. So that was one good thing that happened, and I did need a place to work
Mhm.
essentially. And I wasn't, it was too late in the game for me to sort of like work my way up through the normal studio system
Right.
and kind of like, coil cables at the studio and clean toilets and do this. It's not as if those things were beneath me. It was more like it was just going to take too long. So
Yeah.
I had to kind of like have a little bit more of an entrepreneurial mindset and say I need to kind of get in quicker, higher,
Mhm.
and so having a record deal, which allowed the enterprise of a recording studio begin. And then all of a sudden, by the year literally 2000, so celebrating 25 years
Mhm.
here, I have this space. And then once you have a space, there's some legitimacy to that.
Yeah.
And so then I can kind of like take meetings, and then I can have artists here. And that's where I started to build my career. So, I mean, you could argue that the first break was that little record deal, for the
Mhm.
electronic music record, and then a number of things along the way. And nothing was kind of like, oh, this was the one that did it. I think
Mhm.
it was all like sort of smaller steps. One of the things that's sort of been true for me always is that I've had the most success in just kind of like being closest to what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And that's not saying that to kind of like be buzzwords for anyone listening, but like it's really true for me. Like when I've kind of like followed the passion part of the thing, which included the music that got that first record deal, and it included the thing that was like my first Grammy nomination, and included the thing that I'm doing now that I'm most passionate about. Like it was all like just allowing that passionate side to
Yeah.
run free and say, what do I actually want to do here, with my life, with my music, with my career?
Yeah.
Where is that guiding me? And so those were all kind of like the things which I think were the compass. I always kind of kept that in mind.
Yeah.
And one thing I think about too during those early years, I could have done a lot of things which would have made me more money at the time, but I think would have been more short term. Like I had a recording studio, right? So I could say, hey, I'm going to charge you $100 and we're going to record your vocals. And I have a bunch of crap projects come in that mean
Sure.
nothing and do nothing for my career. And I would have probably made a lot more than I did at that time, but I kind of invested in myself and say, like, okay, I don't really care about the money right now, as
Yeah.
long as that's getting taken care of somewhere else, either from another job or from other little projects. But I want to at least have as part of my portfolio things that I care about. And it turns out, when you ask about kind of the breaks on that first Grammy, nomination, when I started my studio, I think it was like within 1 year of starting my studio, I worked with this artist named Maisha, who was uh, important artist in my life, and we started making music together just for the love of it. We started writing songs, and it was a little bit. We always saw ourselves like Burt Bacharach and
Mhm.
Dionne Warwick. It was a little bit
Yeah.
of that type of collaboration where we'd write and produce. Well, I produce and we'd write together and make music. And over the next several years, we did that, and gradually formed an album that we put out on my label, and then got some really nice attention for that, which sort of like brought in some other things. It's always like you do this and then people hear it or see it, and then they're interested in working with you.
I love it. So you've worked with, I mean, we rattled off just a few names, but you guys, please read his bio in the show notes. There's so much that I've left out, but Scott has done such incredible stuff. You have to work with these really big personalities. How, because this is a leadership thing and this is a leadership podcast.
Yeah.
So how do you get somebody like a John Legend who is very, self-aware, he knows what he likes,
Right.
how do you tell him I don't like that choice or try it
Mm.
a different way? Like, what's your approach?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great question. What I'd say, just going back to, our knowing each other, for example, and these themes of leadership and this and that, you know, I think that I'm a musically talented person, obviously, but like I think honestly that my highest talents, have to do with like people and
Yeah.
understanding people. I really mean that, and and
Yeah.
and that can sound trite, but it's true,
You're
and it
here,
ties.
so it's not because you wouldn't be here if I didn't know that about you. So, yeah.
Thank you. But it ties into what you're asking because like having a way with people is essentially it's I think the top level thing in being a producer. Obviously, you've got to, you're the creative boss of a music project,
Mhm.
right? And you're kind of like it, I describe being a music producer to folks like you're the equivalent of a film director.
Yeah.
So if whatever you think a film director does in a film, that's what music producers do in music. And so, there's a lot of things involved in being a film director or music producer, and some of them are technical and some of them are just sort of
Instinct. Yeah.
aesthetic,
Yeah.
things and influences and just kind of like inspirations that you have. But at the end of the day, you're making art with people.
Yeah.
And these people come in a variety of shapes, sizes, egos,
Yeah.
levels of fame, and all this. And what you have to do is find a pathway for each one. And I don't have any um, sort of set ways of the way I am, other than I really try to be honest and straightforward and meet a person where they are. And I look at a little bit uh, goal wise, like I'm always thinking of what is the goal of a particular interaction or project or this or that. And that can sound very sort of manipulative, but I don't view it.
No, I think you're putting structure in place to get to a common, wish, and that's no different than leading in business and getting people to see. I worked with a really, really difficult rep, and everyone hated her, and
Mhm.
she was incredibly successful and was making crazy big commission checks.
Right.
And I was the only leader that ever called her out on her shit.
Yeah.
And she has massive respect for me because of that
Yeah.
and has changed the way that she operates because she knew that was not going to work for her.
Exactly.
Um, so I get that and I totally hear what you're saying and I love that. Was there any experience with any big artists that
Yeah.
that you got to that place through a little struggle and strife?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I'll think of sort of things that I can say, but like,
Yeah.
as a producer, it is your job to push back on things if you
Mhm.
don't like it. And I'm a really, whatever you're seeing here, that's kind of how I am. I'm a nice person, open, but like when it comes down to it, I'll kind of like, you know, lay down the law a little bit, but always with openings,
Yeah.
and the way I usually phrase stuff is like, look, here's my opinion on this. I want to hear yours and I respect yours. Um, and I'll usually kind of say why I feel a certain way. Um, and either someone's going to like that or they're not, but I'm not going to fight anyone on it. That's
But
not
you're
what
also
I'm.
building a lot of trust,
Yeah,
and they're coming to you and working with you because they trust that you're really good at what you do.
yeah,
So I imagine they've been told or they've experienced it
yeah.
before that working with Scott is going to be a certain kind of experience and he's going to give it to you straight, but in the nicest, kindest way he knows how.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes into it. You're not as fortunate at the beginning of your career when it comes to stuff like that because like
Right.
you're just establishing. But like, most people that I'm working with like know of me in some capacity, and so and I think they kind of get to know me. And also, no music project ever starts with me without sitting down with the person for a few hours.
Yeah.
But to kind of get back to your question and sort of like where it can be a little bit rubby, you are working with people who are, in some cases, very accomplished
Sure.
and very famous and have like really strong opinions on things, which is, both great and sometimes like hard to deal with. And you do have to stand up for yourself. And I think that at the end of the day, you're respected for that.
Mhm.
But what I mean about sort of the techniques of a goal in mind, if I'm working with a famous person, this happened somewhat recently, and I'm not going to mention her name, but like a difficult person,
Mm.
and I knew that I wasn't getting what I wanted or needed from it and had to pivot. And sometimes, and the reason why I don't see that there's absolutes in this is because like sometimes this approach is going to be better and sometimes this. And for some people, it's like if you're a bit deferential, then they're going to see openness there and then be
Mhm.
more comfortable and not put up the defenses. Uh,
Sure.
in another situation, it's very much the opposite. If they see a kind of like deferential person, they will stomp all over you.
Sure.
And so I had sort of started with the softer thing, um, and uh, and that wasn't working at all. And
Hmm.
and then I went back and like, look, and then and then it worked. But you do sometimes, or at least I do, sometimes have to pivot, and it's just all about getting what you need. And a lot of these things when I'm working, whether it's singers, artists, or musicians, who are very accomplished, I know that I only have a certain amount of time with them. And I
Hmm.
know, one technique that I'll have is like, look, let's get this down both ways, as you hear it and as I hear it. Just, indulge me for a second.
Yeah, and let's see what we like better. Yeah, I love that.
But I
So,
think openness is key. Yeah.
yeah, so producing music is not the only thing that you've done. You started a whole bunch of companies. So, can you just quickly take us through some of that?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I see it that music is and hopefully will be always my kind of prime core career. But I think that if I were to sort of summarize, having the greatest thing that I've achieved is expertise in an area. And what expertise allows, and I think that you understand this well with, your own career being evidence of it,
Mhm.
is that you can parlay that expertise into a lot of different venues. And so
Right.
for me, that's been a way to kind of diversify, my desires and creativity, and it's all within this, realm of music. And I just had this idea going back, a ways of this family, an interrelated family of businesses with a core sort of aesthetic, and mission, if you will, of kind of like excellence with regard to music. And what that's been specifically for me is that this, company of Eusonia, which was originally and is a record label, sort of a small boutique label that serves artists that I feel are either underrepresented, or their music sort of like can easily either be in between genres or fall between
Sure.
tracks, but I think of as excellent and deserves a platform. So that was kind of how that was founded. And then the studio is an outgrowth of that and that energy. And I always like that model. When you go back to Motown Records and then Motown Studios,
Yeah.
Atlantic Records, Atlantic Studios, it was just like this creative place which had both aspects of the business. And then sort of like completing the trifecta, I've always, you can't see it now, but I'm surrounded by, on all sides, by instruments
Oh,
and
yeah. For those that are not watching and just listening, Scott has one, two, three, four, five, six keyboards behind him, a whole bunch of amps.
well, there's 18 of those things in the room, and then it's like there's gear for days. But I like that stuff, and I like, you can make, you know, albums on a laptop, and that's amazing. I like sort of part of the process of involving,
Yeah.
older machines, or actual, the original instruments instead of samples of them and stuff like that. So that's part of thing I like. But anyway, what I found is the final piece for Usonia is, the some of the equipment, the high-end equipment that makes music. And so I've gone into business with that, and we're going to be releasing our first, things. We have our first reviews coming out on our first product in the fall, which is exciting. And we basically starting to make microphone preamplifiers, which are the things that allow microphones to sound very good in recording. So
Oh,
so there's
cool.
that. So I mean, so that's kind of like the trinity of Usonia Enterprises. And then, on that same thing of sort of allowing expertise and your passions to guide the way. Like, I've always been interested in recording studios. I've always been interested in, kids, and sort of like working with different, people from different areas. And so I was asked to be involved in this project in the Caribbean. Originally, this was through the Grammy organization that was pretty active in as a trustee. And um, a lot of years later, this was started 10 years ago, but we have like a beautiful multi-million-dollar facility on the island of Anguilla in the Caribbean, and that's called Anguilla Music Academy. That, I'm so proud to kind of be a founding partner of, and
Yeah.
to make that happen. And that's just an example. I think all of these things are things I never would have pictured would have been part of my life, and they are. Or even kind of like going to kind of like, go to Yale to kind of like talk about,
Yeah.
making or something like that. Like I just like I wouldn't have thought that, would happen, and they have, just as a result of like getting some core expertise in an area.
I think that's a great message. And I love that you're building on all of this stuff throughout, a number of years. And you stayed true to your heart, which led you to new opportunities, which has definitely been my experience, not the corporate side, although I did a little bit of that in corporate, but really the corporate side. I mean, I wouldn't have anticipated I'd be doing any of this stuff,
Right.
and I love it the most. And so it just goes to show you that when you're just listening to your heart and you're really true, the world really can be your oyster. So on that note, let's pause for just a second. We'll be back in 30 seconds with some more questions with Scott. So hang tight. If you like the stories you hear every week on this show, guess what? I have hundreds more from my nearly 30 years in the leadership trenches. And I don't just talk about building irresistible culture, I do it. You can bring me into Keynote, moderate your panels, or work directly with your leaders to drive material change. So let's roll up our sleeves, go out to heartbeatforhire.com, let's connect, and let's make some magic happen. Go lead with heart. Welcome back. Scott, this is one of my favorite questions. So, what inspires you?
Yeah, well, I mean, so many things. I think I have we've moved out of New York City, and so my family and I live about an hour north, and we have like 15 chickens and just a whole different type of life. But what I get is sort of the two very different sides and looks of life, which is that my recording studio is in Manhattan,
Mhm.
uh, where I'm at, many days of the week and nights. And then I have this other life kind of in the country or surrounded by horse farms. And so that's inspiring to me. Just the back and forth of two extremes sort of in environments and sort of being inspired by the sights and sounds and smells of New York City, which is different. I don't find it quite as inspiring as it used to be when
Yeah.
I was younger. When New York was a little bit less like Times Square, I guess, but it's still inspiring. And then I'm also inspired by kind of like having kids growing up and running around flower patches and all the different things that happen there. So that's inspiring. Another thing that's inspiring, I don't have unfortunately as much time to listen to music and discover it, and almost it's like that part's a little bit like work for me because I have to kind of sometimes keep up on things. But every once in a while, I'll listen to something and just be like floored,
Yeah.
and that's a really nice thing to happen. I went to a show the other night. I don't go to that many music shows, and I was blown away by this artist. His name's Isaiah Sharkey, who has got to be one of the greatest guitar players ever to live and singers. And I
Wow.
went to see the show, and I was so inspired. I asked my manager after. I was like, "Can you reach out to his management and see if they'd like to, if he'd like to get together?"
Yeah.
Because I really love what he does. And so heard back, and then I went to another show and met with him before, and hopefully we'll be doing some stuff together. But like, those are the types of things that are inspiring, the things that you don't expect and that and also pursuing it. I think one of the things that in 2025 specifically, and I'm going to kind of keep on going with this, the way that my work works is that I get to choose the projects that I work on, but it's from a subset of things that have come to me and filtered, through, my management or my team or something,
Mhm.
right? And so, and while there's an element of choice where, if there's three things that come in and I have room for one and I pick one, so you could say, hey, that's autonomous and that's my choice.
Yeah.
It's really not in an original sense my choice because like I didn't pick those three that
Right.
came in. They came to me. And so one of the things that I said to myself and was a goal for 2025 is to incorporate more things that are my choices.
Yeah.
And so when you ask what's been inspiring to me, the single most inspiring thing that's happened to me in this last year was saying that to myself that I'm going to pick
Mhm.
some stuff instead of stuff picking me. And so I've started these two projects. One's called Continuum, which kind of like takes music from my youth and my formative years, which were really the 1980s,
Mhm.
because like that's when I was, between the ages of, say 9 and 19, right? Where music was, that's kind of the stuff of it. I think for most people, that's
Yeah.
that's where you kind of get, if you were in the 60s and you were that age,
In your DNA. Yeah.
it's in your DNA. So that music was in my DNA, although it wasn't like during those times, like I much preferred music from 70s and 60s,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
still do. But there was something about the songs that I really liked from that time. I thought there were some great songs and songwriting in the 80s, and I never loved the production style. So I always wanted to kind of have an opportunity to
Take
take
a
some of
song
those
and
songs.
fix it the way you imagine it.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
and so
great.
that's one of the things I did. So this project Continuum that I have a partner named Sarah with, and we basically pick songs from the 80s and like iconic songs from the 80s, and then I've worked with all these people and have great relationships with folks. So I am asking each one to be a guest artist on each release,
Oh,
and
that's so
that has been
cool.
it's basically if I could do this for the rest of my life and
Oh
nothing
my
else.
God,
I
that's
would, I
so
would, I
fun.
would do it, and it's the most fun. So that's what I'm most excited about and been most inspired by.
I love it. So, what would you like your legacy to be?
That's a tough one and big question. I think yeah, honestly, I'm not trying to sound humble or whatever, but I'd like to be known as a good dad and a good husband, and that's more important to me than the other stuff. So kind of full stop there. Within the realm of music, um, I think that th there are certain songs that I have done, and I could probably on if I had 20, I do have 20 digits, but I like 20 songs that I feel like when I made them, if this were the last thing that I made and it's what's left, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
So one of the things I just did for the Continuum project was a cover of Elton John's, I guess that's why they call it the blues, which was a song that
Nice.
I loved and
Oh,
recorded it in a very different kind of way. And those are the types of things that I'd love the legacy to be, that there's just these sort of like, you know, perennial works of art that you've made that can be listened to and appreciated in different times. But
mm,
more important than that, even somewhere in between sort of like family and then the work itself, I think that one thing that I've done, which we haven't talked about, is that I've been a mentor to a lot of people here at my studio. It's very much the way that I approach life. I didn't have any significant mentors, or at least constant ones. I had like little things
little
here and there,
blips.
little
Yeah,
sparks. And I know that the career that I'm in, that other people pursue, is a very difficult one
it
where
is.
you can pay a lot of money to go to school for this, but like that's not necessarily going to set you up. So I've kind of taken it on to be a mentor to
So
a
cool.
lot of folks, and there have been, I think at this point, between 60 and 70 people that I've taken on, and uh, over the last 25 years, and to see their career
Mm,
happen or their careers happen is one of the most satisfying things, and it's
yeah, that's
incredible, and it's,
really
it's actually
gratifying.
astonishing to me. So there's a whole family of people. It's like my kids or my little brothers or with this or and sisters who have gone on to make it in this very difficult industry, and that's part of your legacy.
Yeah,
And
of
I think
course it
that
is.
that's arguably that the reach of
Well,
that.
they never forget you,
They
and
don't. It's an
your
incredible thing.
thumbprint is on what they've built. So Scott, how can people follow you and read more about your work?
Sure. Well, I should put the disclaimer that I'm notoriously bad at kind of keeping up with these things, and
And he's not on social media, y'all.
I'm
So
not on social media. Yeah, and that's it's just because it's just not for me, and I think like it's just I don't think a lot of people realize that it's a choice whether to do a lot of these things.
right.
It's a choice. You don't have to have a smartphone, although most people do, and you don't have to be on social media. But some of my companies have social media. I'd say the most significant things would be my website, which is skojak.com. And I'm going to be updating that soon. But that shows my work and kind of the breadth of what I do in the various businesses. And then the Continuum project is all the socials are at Continuum Music, CantinuumMusic. So that's another one. And yeah, those are
We'll
those.
put those in the show notes, y'all, so you can find them. That's easy for us to do. But
Yeah.
what's next for you? Other
Mm,
than Continuum. I mean, unless that is the next.
it's always next. I think that we're gonna do one song a quarter, which is kind of a permissible rate just given my other work of doing that. And I've got a lot of fun projects on tap right now. The next Continuum single with Diva Mahal is coming out, and then after that with Lila DuPont, and that's going to be fun, sort of surprise songs that they're doing. And then I'm doing a new single with Ryan Shaw. I'm doing an album with this artist named Seth Shomes. I'm doing um, hopefully a project with Isaiah Sharkey, who I mentioned before.
Mhm.
Another project with Corey Henry tomorrow, who's one of my favorite artists in the world. And just I've been fortunate kind of keeping busy with all these things.
Well, this has been such a treat. Thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself with me and with my audience. And I just This is awesome. I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy to see all your success. It's been wonderful. So,
Thank you. And likewise, Lindsay, you're a natural at this. I mean, it's
oh, thank you so
yeah.
much. So, guys, I'm gonna have an audience question coming right up. So sit tight. Scott, thank you. And guys, hang on. There'll be more in just a moment. Today's audience question is, how do I give hard feedback without crushing morale? This is a tough one because leaders are tasked with this all the time, and you want to be the cheerful and the person that's leading with heart all the time. But here's the good news. If you're leading with heart regularly, all the time, then those tougher messages that you have to deliver, be it bad feedback or a layoff or a restructuring or change in comp plan, those things will come a little easier. So one of the things that I had to do, this story, I talk about it a lot, is, giving feedback to somebody who's very successful, and they usually don't think that they need a lot of feedback. So, and here's the funny thing. If you say to someone, "Hey, can I give you some feedback?" It's always going to be negative, because if it's positive, you don't ask. You just say it. So when you have to ask those questions, you'll see that trigger. You'll see that moment of people going, "Oh no, here it comes." And they brace themselves for impact, which stinks. But you do have to be able to say, "Hey, I listened to you talking through whatever this was, and I wanted to share an alternative approach. Or I saw someone else do it this way, and maybe this would work better for you." You're not trashing their idea. You're really just coming at them from a different perspective. But all of these tough messages will always land much, much easier when you build trust. So start there first, and you're going to be way better equipped to delivering tough news in the future. Thanks as always for listening. Please tell your friends about the show. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go leave a 5-star review. This helps us with our sponsors. This helps us get more listeners. I am so grateful to you for always listening and being loyal. Thank you so much. Have the best day. Go lead with heart. Thanks for listening to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or consider leaving a 5-star review and a great rating at Spotify or Apple. Thank you so much for your support. Have a great day.